This episode, we're talking Batman, Nirvana, and how it's made its way back 30 years later. This is Pastors on Pop. I am with James, and it is so good to have you once again on our cool little show that we do here.
Hello, good to be here.
Yes, so today we wanted to talk about the Batman.
Yes.
Yeah, not a Batman, not lowercase T Batman, but the Batman. And so both you and I have seen the Batman. I think everybody at this point has seen the Batman. So maybe there will be some spoilers today, but I don't think a lot. And so so this new Batman, honestly, I didn't want to see it when I first heard about it. When they started, talking about it a while ago.
Because Twilight.
Yes, that was actually the main one. And I am such a fan of the Dark Knight series. I just look at it with Christian Bale and going, man, you can't do Batman any better. And I am such a fan of Batman. I just want it to be great. And so I didn't know how Twilight guy could make Batman great. And I just didn't have it. And then my son wanted to see it for his birthday. And so I was like, oh, if I have to. And then he showed me a trailer and I was like, kind of interesting. And then I went and I was actually honestly blown away. It was like, having read the comic books and knowing that Batman was the world's greatest detective and how that's never really been depicted on screen. And then all of a sudden that was, and the way that I kind of explain it to people is that it's like the PG-13 version of The Sopranos meets Seven with Batman sprinkled in.
Yes.
That's the way I look at it. So I ended up actually really liking it and finding it really intriguing. So much so that I held on to my HBO Max membership an extra month so I could watch it again when it came out. So call me a fan. Transform's not the right word. I've been won over.
Yeah.
And actually would be excited for another version of Batman.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sequel.
Yeah, sequel. Let's do a sequel. We were talking earlier. Poison Ivy. That's my vote for the next villain. So what? Give me your Batman story and if you saw the movie.
Yeah. So for me, I thought about all the Batman versions over the years, the Michael Keaton, the original, right, and just the evolution of Batman, and even like Gotham, the TV show, and the Joker, just how empathy and understanding the Batman Lego movie, which was awesome.
that's really
Loved
good.
it. But like how the personality of Batman, beyond just being a crime fighter, how it's evolved and it's emerged, and with this one, how it went to this dark emo.
Yes, emo Batman was everywhere.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And for me, and we'll talk more about this, but I'm a bit artistic when it comes to like music and those kind of. So like, I got super geeked out about the sounds and the cinematography and how they filmed Gotham, and then I kind of why would you still live there? Like, this is like, move.
Yes.
Get a U-Haul, right? Yeah. But the story, the environment that they created for the human experience in this movie was just mind-blowing.
Yes, yeah. And the way they depicted the characters was pretty unbelievable in terms of not making them so campy, comic booky, but actually something that's like a mystery thriller is what it ended up being. And I had some of the same thoughts when I was watching of like, who would actually live here? And then I thought of you actually, because the only sunrise that you see in the entire movie is at the very end and it's raining. And I thought, oh, this must be what Seattle's like.
It's totally what Seattle's like. Yeah. And as messed up as the city is, like, that's pretty much.
Yeah. So putting you on the spot of like having seen Batman, like what was like one of the memorable scenes or one of your favorite parts of the movie?
Gosh. I don't know if I can boil it down, brother.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, for me, it was when the Falcone reveal. Spoiler alert: the Falcone reveal with Catwoman. Like, I thought that was like this twist that all of a sudden, and she went for vengeance, which was what Batman was. Vengeance, on this. And so as I was like thinking through the whole movie, what was interesting to me is towards the end. So that was the part that I liked. The other part that I really liked is when he was talking to the Riddler at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this moment where he pauses because what the Riddler was doing is what Batman would want to do, but he's good, right? Like these were all the bad guys, but they were good guys, and the Riddler was bringing vengeance to the quote unquote good guys. And like Batman was in this moment of like quandary, like, do I actually align with the Riddler? And it was this interesting movie moment. And for me, just to think about that, like, like that is real.
That's a super good perspective because it's almost like Star Wars and like the dark side and right like
yeah.
like you want to take vengeance and you want like there's something in a human heart that wants to go there, but you know that you compromise.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, like Batman's all about vengeance, except for the guys that were in the power.
Yeah.
That were supposed to be good.
Yeah.
And then it was all of a sudden he was on the opposite side trying to protect the guys that were. Yeah, it was weird. It was kind of boo for me. So Batman's super cool. If you haven't seen the movie, you should go watch it. We're fans of it. I found, according to the film director, Matt Reeves, who's on board for the next one as well, that this Batman that he created was actually inspired in part by Kurt Cobain, the lead guy of Nirvana, who you're a big fan of.
Yeah.
And the way that he depicted it is that he wanted Batman to be this tormented superstar who goes into seclusion to battle his demons.
Yeah.
And so that's... they wrote that all out. And so much of the marketing was built around Nirvana's song, Something in the Way. It's also featured a couple of times in the movie. And so my question for you is, do you remember the first time that you listened to Nirvana and kind of the impact that it had on you? How old were you when Nirvana kind of made it big? That was early 90s.
30.
Yeah. 30?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. No, that made me 16.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, 24, I guess.
24,
yeah.
okay. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the first song was Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Yep.
And it was coming
That
out
was
of
a big deal.
Oh my gosh. And it was the sound of it and it was the visuals because at the time everything was like it was still the end of the 80s hair band, Guns N' Roses and all those bands were kind of on the decline, and then but the production was there, and then all of a sudden these thrift store kids from Seattle, shot this video in a high school gym, right? and everything looked really low budget and the energy, the chord progression, the visuals, I think, just connected with people in such a raw, emotional way.
Yeah. Well, I remember Nirvana being pretty big, so I would have been like middle school, entering into high school when they were like rising into their fame, and I can remember pretty vividly when Kurt Cobain died.
Yeah. And
the effect that it had over the school, like it was like, someone very important. Like I can only think of like the only other time that I can think of as the same effect that I saw that his death had on people was when Princess Diana died. And how that just had that rippling effect across communities and all that. And so at least being in high school, I think I was when he passed, or late middle school, that I can remember like just the significance of that.
Yeah.
And how his music spoke to the teenage heart of the day, of what was going on and what teens were feeling in the early 90s and all of that was wrapped up into that. Hey, my name is Matt Manning, and I am the senior pastor here at Crossroads Church, and hopefully you are loving what you're listening to today. If you are, we would love for you to go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. You can leave us a comment. We read all of them. And if you like it, we'd love for you to share this with a friend. Every week we get together as a church to celebrate what God is doing, and you can join us every Sunday at 8:30, 10, and 11:30 online or in-house. Let's get back to the podcast.
And uniquely, I mean, kind of like bands like the Doors in the 60s and 70s, and like it wasn't necessarily the lyrics of Nirvana's music, it was the sound and it was how it made you feel, right? Yep. Because I mean, the lyrics of Smells Like Teen Spirit or even Something in the Way, like the lyrics aren't really profound, but how it sounds and what it emotes from you is so capturing.
Yeah. And, part of what we want to do in this podcast and in the podcast coming is actually look at music and the role that music plays in our life. And then what is it like a Christian response to that music? And so we're going to spend some time today actually talking about a little bit of the worldview and the impact of Something in the Way that was featured in the Batman movie. And so the story, which I'm sure you're aware of, is that Kurt Cobain, he wrote Something in the Way while it was really a story about his life when he had been living under a bridge homeless. Yeah. And that's where he wrote these lyrics. And what was interesting is that actually years later, he spray painted these lyrics on the bridge, under the bridge where he wrote them, and they lived there as kind of this like memorial until the city came and painted them over. But that's kind of the beginning of these lyrics, is a homeless dude living under a bridge, and these are the words that he puts on paper. And then he gets into the recording studio, and you know this story pretty well.
Yeah. So the story of the recording. So Butch Vig is the producer, and they drove to L.A. to Sound City Studios to record it, and all the other tracks were recorded in the room A, and Kurt was trying to record this in there, and it just wasn't hitting the mark, and then so they decided to cut it for the day, come back tomorrow. So he came into the control room, and Kurt just laid on the floor with his acoustic guitar.
Which sounds so Cobain.
Totally. And he just laid there playing the song and just like singing it almost like a whisper. And Butch said he looked over there and he was like, oh my gosh, this is it. So he turned off all the fans, all of the equipment in the room, put a mic on him laying on the floor, and actually just had him just keep singing it. And he recorded in this incredibly unconventional way. But I think that's a part of why on the recording it sounds so intimate. I mean, it's like you put headphones on and turn up really loud, and it sounds almost like you shouldn't be listening to this.
It's really eerie.
Yeah.
So when it comes to Nirvana and the music of Nirvana, what's probably crazy is that nobody probably imagined in 1994, after a pretty quick rise of 3 years.
Yeah,
that's all that they lived, right? Like we think of like Elton John, who's been a headliner in the music world for, 50 years now, 60 years now. That this group had a 3-year togetherness. And yet here we are 30 years later talking about their music and how it's impacting culture even today, that a major blockbuster movie is using it. And so my question to you, being the music guy, is why do you think that this song was chosen for the Batman, and why today teenagers, like my son, has been introduced to Nirvana and is actually like gravitating towards it? Like what do you think that phenomenon is? Like how a band of 3 years has had whose music's had a life of now going on 30.
So my gut feeling on that is that like one of the age old questions is, does art mimic culture, or does culture mimic art? And I think in a case like Nirvana, I think what they recorded was something in the culture that the media and even families didn't really know was going on. And when a young generation in the day heard the music, and still to this day, I mean, there's something that your kids and mine connect with Nirvana, that it gives them words to some of the emotions they feel, and some of that which I think part of the appeal 30 years later is that it brings up some of the angst and some of the hurt in the heart of people that is a real beautiful possibility of art.
Yeah. And one of the things I found fascinating is that when it comes to Something in the Way, that every time Kurt sang that from his feelings and from his emotions, the reason that he wrote that is because he thought that everything was in the way every time he tried to feel better.
Yes.
Like most of his life was lived in, kind of the slums emotionally. And every time he tried to feel better, like something was in the way.
Yeah.
And I think that in our culture today that actually speaks to where a lot of people live, whether they're teenagers or us today. Like there's this constant bombardment of the world around us in a negative sense. Like you just turn on the news and it's just negative, 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 negative. And it's like all of the world is trying to bring us down into bitterness, into anger, to incite feelings in us that are not positive. Like that's what I look at when I look at the major news channels. Like, the fastest way to a great rating is to incite anger in me.
Yeah.
And when we want to go feel better, it's like we look at the world around us and there's nothing to feel better about. Every time there's something in the way.
Yeah.
And I think that has
that's a really good point.
Yeah, it deeply resonates with people in the 90s and today in the 2020s. And so, when we think about this from a Christian worldview, what would be some of your insights into Nirvana's music, generally speaking, maybe something in the way, specifically speaking, and how are we as Christians to view this? Like, I guess my first question, is it okay for Christians to put on the headphones and listen to Nirvana?
Yeah. Well, and I remember when Nirvana came out, I wrestled with their name, right? Mm-hmm. Because at the time in my spiritual maturity, it was almost like I met Jesus and I was walking with him, but Nirvana is a different version of heaven and it's Buddhism, right? Yeah. And it was just like, oh my gosh, like is this a rabbit hole that's going to take me somewhere dark? Does it make sense? So, I mean, I even wrestled initially with just struggling with the name. I think for me, and I mean, even looking at the name and the concerns there is, if it's resonating in the culture, and if you're a mature Christian, I mean, like kids eat certain diets, and you allow them to watch certain shows, and you hold things back knowing that, hey, when they're this old, we're totally going to watch Saving Private Ryan, right? And but and the same thing spiritually, like if you're new as a follower of Jesus, like eat good food, like get to know Jesus, get to know how God's interacted with people as we find in the Bible. Like you need to eat that stuff. But after you've walked with him for a while, I think there's something really healthy just to understand what's resonating in the culture, to understand how your faith is going to fit in with that, because God is working through that. I love the fact that God is never working defense. So, but understanding what your kids are listening to or what's hot in the culture allows us to continue to engage culture. Does it make sense? So, I mean, and music's pretty easy for me. You're a total movie guy, but I every year watch the videos after Lollapalooza or Coachella festivals. And I don't like all the bands, but I watch the bands so that I know who's out there, what the style is, what their general message is. Does it make sense? Because it always works its way into how I'm engaging with people. And what the gospel looks like in 2022, which it's going to look different in 23 in how we apply it. Not the principles of the gospel and how God's engaging people, but how we live it out is going to just look different.
Yeah, I think that when I listen to music or think about music, one of the things that I try to do is have a pretty diverse listening. Like oftentimes I'll just tell Alexa to play the top music.
Oh, that's good.
And to listen through it, because there is a worldview that's being communicated in that. And as communicators of the gospel, to understand what is the worldview of culture right now, particularly as it's being spoken through music. And these are top songs because they're touching people at a deep level. They're putting to words and to music emotion that people are feeling. That's what music is. And so for us to be able to listen to it with a discerning ear of going, not just do I like it or not, which is, I think, totally fine, but what is actually the worldview that's behind this, that's being communicated, that I'm now living in.
Yeah.
And to understand a culture's music is to understand a culture. And I think that that's just so valuable for us as believers.
Yeah. And if like for a a verse to kind of justify that view. I mean, like Paul in Acts when he went to Athens, right? And he walked the city.
Yes.
And then as he talked to people, he didn't slam them for their idolatry and all this stuff. His conversation was, I see that you're very religious. Like you're very, like you have altars to all these different gods. And then he said, and I saw one to a known God. Let me tell you who he is.
Yeah.
But he wouldn't have been able to have that conversation if he didn't listen to the music, so to speak, of the culture that he stepped into.
Yeah. It's a very hard thing to be a learner of the culture and then to intentionally be different from that culture.
Yeah.
And to not allow the culture to impact us in such ways that it drives us away from Christ, but to approach culture and go, what is it that we can learn from this so that we can lead people to Christ in it. And I think that's a fine line that us Christians have to walk. And sometimes we don't always get it right. I think sometimes we're way too loose in our values and our beliefs because of the way that culture is pouring over us. And I think other times we are way too rigid with how we walk in this life that it so far distances us from the people in this world that we're called to bring to life.
And we talk a lot as a staff about cultivating a biblical worldview, and that's the awareness of the truth of God's word and the culture around us. And there's Christians that we interact with that are weird.
Yeah,
and I love them. Love you guys, but they've created their own little bubble, and they don't even understand how the rest of the world works, and it just comes out in everything they say, everything they do, that they're not salt and light. Does it make sense? Like and it's a balancing act. And I probably, with some things I laugh at and stuff, right? Yeah. It's like, you're always kind of hitting the guardrail on either side, but you're trying to live in that sweet spot of engaging people in the culture. And Jesus did it so beautifully.
Yeah.
Because he never hit a guardrail in the process like we do.
Yeah.
But he was so winsome to the people that he met who were far from God and actually believed that God was against them.
Yeah. When somebody asks me whether they should listen to a song like Something in the Way by Nirvana, oftentimes what I'll ask them is if they like it, if this is a song that you like, why does it resonate with you?
Yeah.
Like, what is it that it's speaking into your heart that you're feeling emotionally in this? And then what is the drive in your spiritual growth in this? And so I don't think that it's necessarily wrong to listen to Nirvana, to enjoy a song like this song. One of the funny things is I was pulling up different stuff. I found a hour and a half, a 90-minute loop of Something in the Way, just over and over again. And so I was listening to it, trying to think through this and go, what is the worldview that's being spoken here and all of that? And after about 10 minutes, I was like, man, I am finding myself so depressed.
Totally. Yeah.
I can't listen to this anymore the third time through. But if that resonates with you, what is it that it's actually speaking into your heart? And then what is it that actually Jesus is revealing, if you're a Jesus follower, about your heart, that maybe you need to take a step in his direction? Like if you look at it from Cobain's worldview, that everything that I try to do, everything gets in the way of my happiness, of me feeling good. If that's a reality of your life, then what is it that the gospel is speaking into you? Because the gospel is one of hope. It's one of joy. Yeah. It's one of salvation and redemption. It's not one of just man, we're just making it through another day.
Yeah.
And so what is that song's speaking to you, that ultimately is speaking something about your soul that maybe needs to be addressed in your own spiritual journey?
So good.
Yeah. So, well, it's a lot of fun talking Batman, Nirvana. You're like the resident music expert here on staff, particularly when it comes to rock and roll. And so we're going to do a music series here where we're going to talk about anthems. We're going to drop ourselves into the rap world. We got a lot of fun things through the summer, but we're going to do a whole series over the next couple of podcasts, really, of music and how we should interact as Christians. And so you can look forward to that. I want to thank you for joining the podcast today. We'll catch you next time.